151 of Coffee and Co-Read, your source for all things literary with Catherine
and Kristen, where we believe there's nothing better than a hot coffee and an awesome book. Join us for our virtual book club where we take one book a month and dive into all the drama, adventure, and romance we can find. Hi, Catherine.
Hey, Kristen.
So, because we are in week 3 of January, we haven't really gotten a chance to discuss it yet. I know. Doesn't feel like week 3 of January.
No.
We thought we would go over our reading goals for 2025. And I know you've sort of been saying for the past few months that reading goals are really not your jam anymore. So, like, as in terms of assigning a number. So, do you have any goals?
I am going to try to read more. Like, what does that look like, though? So, I guess I'm going to try to read before I go to bed every night and try not to look at my phone because it's a waste of time. And I know I do too much of it, but it's so hard.
Yeah.
And I'm going to try to stop buying so many books and start reading books I own. But also, like, I bought a book last week. So, and it's still on the way and I'm so excited. And I'm like, maybe I'll read it when it gets here. And I like when I do that, but then why don't I do that with all my books? I just end up with piles. Like,
yeah.
Anyway, so I am reading a book now, and I have that book is coming next week. So hopefully I'll at least read 2 books in the next little while.
That's exciting. Yeah. It sucks when like I think everybody who is a reader has experienced like those lulls, right? Those like, you know, you experience the highs and the lows, the divots of when like there's just nothing that you're in the mood to read, right?
Yeah.
But it almost like sort of the sucky part is us as people, like you and I, and probably those that are listening, we all identify so strongly as readers. It almost feels like there's a certain amount of guilt, like when you hit a dip, you're like, I shouldn't be like this because I'm a reader. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like
100%.
I always feel guilty, like if I haven't read a book in a while. I'm like, well, shit, I'm supposed to be this like voracious reader that like can't put a book down, and I haven't read anything in a while, and it just sort of makes me feel like shit. But I think we need to start the year by giving ourselves some grace.
Because the guilt kind of, I find, compounds until you're like, I don't want to pick up a book because even looking at this book, if I start it and I'm like, then I feel even more guilty. So it's really like, I'd rather avoid the books. And I think that's kind of what happened to me. So, you know.
Yeah.
I think that's a good idea. Some grace.
Yeah. A little bit of forgiveness that like, you know, you can still be a reader and not currently be reading a book.
Well, yeah, I think it's like if you read a book, you're like in a year. If you even read one book, you're reading more books than like half of people. It might even be more of that than that.
Yeah.
You always see these stupid stats in places. It's something like that, though. Because, like, obviously, we're on the book side of, like, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, whatever you're on. So you're going to see all the people that read, like, 300 books in the year, 100 books in the year, 150. And, like, that's not attainable for a lot of people. And it can feel like, can make you feel guilty.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
or like
I agree.
Insufficient, which is not. I'm pretty sure I saw on Facebook, like in one of my book groups, somebody posted that they read 400 books this year.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself, how? Like, legit, how? How did you do that? Because that's reading more than one in a day.
Which I can't, I don't know if the only book I think I've ever read in one single day was Vampire Academy. I got it from you. Yeah. I stayed up till 4 a.m, if that counts as reading it in one day. But that is the only book in my entire life I think I read in one day.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess it depends on, like, what are you considering a book? Because, like, short-ish, you could get books on Kindle that are, like, 80 pages, and you could have them done in a couple of hours. Those count towards your count. You know what I mean? Like, they count towards your number, but, like, there's no way you're reading full-length novels.
Yeah. Unless it's, like, your job somehow. Maybe you're an editor or something. Like, I can't imagine what else. Or, like, a book reviewer. That has to be a job, doesn't it? Like, there's movie reviewers.
Yeah, I guess. Just, like, I can't imagine you're doing that book justice by reading it in a day.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel overwhelmed by it sometimes, but then I'm also like, people, if they can read that fast, good for them. I'm happy with what I can do. Well, I'm not, but I wish that I read more, but, you know.
Yeah.
And it's funny because, like, different years, obviously, you're going to read different amount of books. Like, a few years ago, I was finishing a book on New Year's Eve because I wanted to hit 100.
Yeah.
I was, like, desperate to. So I was literally in the hot tub with my family at, like, 11:30 reading. I was like, is this living? But I hit 100 books.
Yeah.
So, like, you know, you're probably sacrificing things, too, if you're reading that much.
Yeah. I did set a goal.
Yeah.
So last year I set 75. So I think the first year I did 50, then I did 75. And I did hit both times. Not, like, crazy goals, but, like, you know, they were enough where I didn't feel pressured.
Yeah.
Anyway, I've upped it this year to 90. So
nice.
We'll see how it goes. Like, I did reach my goal last year of 75. I got to, like, 86 or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm hoping, like, it is a little bit more challenging, but at the same time, I'm finishing my master's in April. So then I'll have, like, all this free time.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that, you know, that will sort of, I'll have more time for reading. And I have so many books on my shelf that I haven't touched yet that I've really been wanting to.
Yeah.
That, like, I bought because they looked really good and I haven't been able to touch them. So I say been able to. I'm sure I really could have made the time if I wanted to, but, like, you know, it's just one of those things. So yeah, I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that it won't be the worst.
Yeah. No, I think that makes sense. And, like last year we talked about a summer of reading and neither one of us really had a summer of reading. So this year, 2025,
summer of reading.
I'm going to come over, sit on your deck, and we're going to read with our coffees.
Yes.
And then when it hits 11, 12, whatever we feel like, we'll have our beers.
Yes, that's a great idea.
Yeah, so send us a message. Let us know your reading goals for 2025.
Yeah, we'd love to hear your reading goals.
And if you read upwards of 300, 400 books, just tell us your secrets.
Yes.
I just want to be able to read.
Yep.
So yeah, we'll get into it. Just a heads up, this is not a spoiler-free zone, and things might get saucy.
They will.
Oh, I was like, I can't remember.
I think.
I'm sure they must. It's happening all the time now. So this is our second week with Kingdom of the Feared. We're doing chapters 7 to 14 this week. Last week, what happened? Who knows? So last week, somebody died in greed, and
his third, Vesta.
Yeah, Vesta
was murdered.
And allegedly, we decided last week. Because it's a bit sketch. There's just a whole bunch of bits of a body, and it's hard to determine who it is. There's werewolf blood over it, so it's impossible to tell. Because apparently that covers up everything. And Wrath and Emilia have almost had sex, like, twice before all this happened, but then had to go to Greed. So they went to House Greed, saw the body, and then did a blood retribution, I think is what it's called. Wrath called for one against Vittoria because Greed was convinced it was Vittoria. And then they had to sign a thing saying they wouldn't harbor her and they'd basically execute her. So Emilia was like, I need to get incredibly wasted so that I don't have to sign it. So she basically teased the shit out of Wrath and pretended to get drunk, and then he brought her back to his room, and they finally consummated their marriage. And she also got a tattoo on her finger that she had a vision of having on her finger before. So she had married Wrath before, I'm assuming.
Yeah.
Even though it doesn't really sound like they had a whole lot of time once you get to that part in the book. Like, it sounds like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's interesting. I don't remember if that's this week or next week, but when we get to it, we'll have to have a chat about it. And Emilia says that she is a goddess. Does she say that? Well, yes.
Yeah.
She kind of says so what she says is she sees fury, fire, and anger, and the goddess who rules it. And he says he sees his equal and his queen. And she's like, cool. And I was like, wait, does that mean she's a goddess? What does that even mean? So to this week, we get some answers, kind of, in a little bit. So this week we start off with Wrath needs to go sign the oath, and Emilia basically thinks of, like, the shit show they created, and she's like, Lee. And she's a bit like, well, maybe somebody killed Vesta because she was causing shit. And maybe it was somebody in Greed's house. So, like, she's got a whole lot of theories floating around. Wrath says they'll discuss it when they get home, and she starts thinking, like, she's not a witch, she's the goddess of fury. And her irises turn back to brown. So I felt like this was the confirmation, because last week I was like, we didn't fully understand. Well, I didn't fully understand from that until she said this phrase.
Yeah.
So, yeah, she's the goddess of fury.
Can I just say, though,
cool,
that, like, this was in the book when I first read it. Like, this was the moment when I was like, what? And I feel like maybe other people are not on my level when it comes to, like, that revelation. Everyone's like, yeah, they sort of been leading up to it, I guess. And I was, like, shook.
I didn't expect it, because I was like, well, what was it? All the questions she soon has, but I was like, what the fuck was her childhood? Like, what is going on?
Yeah.
How could she be a goddess? Like, I don't, like, we've heard a tiny bit about goddesses, but, like, not really enough. And then I'm like, well, so what is her sister if she's the goddess of fury? Like,
yeah.
And this is 2.25 of the way through a trilogy that we're getting this revelation. I'm like, what the fuck did we read before this? That this is only... Nothing makes sense. There's something that I think happens, I can't remember if it's this week or next week, that I was like, oh my god, I need to read the second book again, because, whoa.
Yeah.
Like, when we get to it. Oh, you know what I'm talking about? Yeah. So, anyway, her irises turn back to brown. So I don't know if this is when it's kind of implied, like, she is a goddess, but she doesn't really remember everything, and she's just, like, back to her normal self. So she looks at the dagger that Wrath gave her, and she originally thought it was his house dagger. He gave it to her last week for us, but, like, 5 minutes ago for her.
Yeah.
It's smaller than his and lighter, and the snake eyes are, like, a dark pink, and there are vines twining around it. And he tells her that it's her dagger. So I don't know if, like, I originally was like, ooh, her house dagger. But she's just like, I don't recognize it at all. And he says he didn't have a chance to give it to her before. So it's a present.
Yeah, he had it made for her. That's lovely.
Sweet.
Can you imagine someone designing a dagger and giving it to you? Like, I know that in terms of the book it's adorable, but, like, in real life I would also think it's adorable.
I would love it. I would display it right there. It would be great.
Yeah.
Jeff, if you're listening, I would like a dagger.
Yes. You have to design
FBI, if
it.
you're listening, I am not going to kill him.
You have to design it, and it has to be special.
Yes. So she looks at it, and she thinks, like, he actually knows her. And then she starts to think that she's an ageless being, and she's like, oh shit. And I'm like, how do you even conceptualize that as a mortal? That you're immortal. Anyway, too much.
Yeah.
She asks him then, and I'm like, it's a bit late for this question, but she asks him if the sex made her a house member. And I'm like, you were trying to avoid that. You should have maybe asked before you had sex. But he says that she still needs to swear a blood oath to his house to, like, be a part of his house.
There's so much, cool. I'm sorry. There's so much stuff you gotta do.
I know, I'm like, so are they married now? And yes. She's just not a member of his house?
I guess.
Because I thought there was still another ceremony. He kind of alluded to there being another ceremony after. But was that just to make her the queen? Like,
yeah, well, but this is what I mean. There's just ceremony upon ceremony that they have to do. I just think they like a party.
That's fair. I like that. I guess she realizes or remembers in this moment that Vittoria is the goddess of death, which she kind of thinks is ironic because that's who she was praying to, like, the entire first book after Vittoria, quote unquote, died.
Yeah. But, like, can I just say that's a cool moment? Like, that's cool.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. It's just like, was Vittoria hearing all of her prayers? And she was like,
Psych.
Stupid. And then she thinks about how weird it is. Like, she had a full life with a full family. She's like, so, like, obviously that was magic. And, like, how can she remember having a whole childhood? Kind of what we were just saying. Like, it is very confusing.
Oh, yeah. I have reams of thoughts and reams of questions tucked away up here.
I'm still, like, I've gotten to a point in the book, I think I've read past this week, I'm on the third week, but I'm at a point now where I'm like, was none of it real?
Yeah.
Not none of it, but, like, were her parents not real?
Yeah. But I know, and it's not clear, which is bothersome.
Yeah, and not even at the end of the book.
I'm not spoiling it.
No. Cool. Okay. So she kind of asks Wrath if he heard what the Duke said about Vesta, and he says he did, but, like, it's just court gossip. But he does say, like, it's interesting about, like, the blood scenting and her asking people to smell the blood and trying to learn more about it, and, like, kind of seems like they both kind of say, like, it's a good way to figure out how to run if she was adding werewolf blood to things to see, like, how much she'd need to put to, like, mask smells.
Yeah.
And also, like, it sounds like she can't smell. Kind of what we had said last week. So Emilia basically says to herself that she's going to assume that Vesta is alive. But she also finds it odd that Vittoria and Greed had an alliance. And that the werewolf, and also with the werewolves too, like, what was this alliance about? Because he was super cagey about it. So she says they need more information about it, and they also need to know, like, why he why he coveted Vesta so much. So those two things from Greed. So she basically asked Wrath to talk to Greed about it, and he's like, I don't think he's going to tell me much about why he made the alliance. He said that last week. He was like, I'm not saying this in front of my enemies.
Yeah.
And then Emilia also says, like, she must have known her attacker because there was no forced entry. And it's like, okay, forensics. So he basically says, then he looks at her and he's like, calls her his wife, And she just thinks to herself, it feels so right. And he just tells her to get dressed and meet him at the carriage. And then they have like a lovely kiss. Except for I think it's like a violent kiss. But it's a lovely kiss of
for them,
husband and wife.
Yeah, for them it's lovely.
Yeah, exactly. So, basically the amount of time it takes her to get dressed is the exact same amount of time it takes him to sign the documents, so they get to the carriage at the same time and just leave. And it's like, okay.
Yeah, they're just getting out of there.
Yeah. In the carriage, she wants to ask if he, found anything out from Greed, and I'm like, in those 2 fucking seconds that it took him to get there, I doubt it. But he's, he motions that they shouldn't talk because they can't ward the carriage because it's moving. Yeah. And I'm like, I don't like that. That explanation doesn't do it for me. You'd think you would build wards into the material of the carriage somehow.
But I feel like their interpretation of magic is different than in other books we've read.
I know, but you'd think you'd come up with something to make your carriage, even just make it soundproof. I know, then other people can use magic, but how can they use magic if it's moving too? All moving things should be free from magic then.
Yeah.
I'm like, I guess so. Fine. So, Emilia basically just looks out the window and she sees that, the river is churning outside, and she thinks, her Nonna used to say that was a bad omen, so she's like, eek. At one point, during their journey, before they're in his house area, he goes on high alert and takes out his dagger and pricks his palm and feeds his blade. And then he's like, if anything happens, activate your cloak. And she's like, what? And he's like, if you put some magic into your cloak, it becomes invisible. But people can still scent you, so
be careful.
You'll have an advantage. Yeah. You can run. And she's like, I'm not leaving you. And he tries to order her, and she's like, no. But he says he's immortal. And I'm like, oh God, what's going to happen? Someone's going to have that fucking blade they brought up. I know it. Anyway, he basically relents eventually because she's like, I'm not leaving you. You're my husband. But he says he'll try to transvideo them home as, if possible, I guess. I'm like, why didn't he just immediately do that? But, and then he tells her to strike first and fast. And then they start to hear a whole bunch of howls. And Wrath just says that they're pissed. And then he kind of smiles because their wrath obviously fuels his power. So he's ready for this. He's the Prince of War. So this is his jam. Wrath knocks on the top of the coach to tell it to stop. And then he tells Emilia if she dies, he will hunt her down and drag her back. And she's like, that sounds like a threat. And he's like, it's a fucking promise. Aww. And he tells her, I love it. I love that scene. He tells her then that he's turned on by bloodshed. And as soon as it's over, he's going to take her to bed. And he hopes that she packed the pearl skirt.
Yikes.
And then you're immediate oh shit, she's not going home, is she? Because if she was going home, they wouldn't be talking about sex right now, because they wouldn't be teasing me. That's all I got. So that kind of takes her nervousness away, and she's like, I would fight 1,000 wolves to go back to bed with Wrath. And then they immediately jump out, and there are 100 wolves on the bridge, and she's like, we're fucked. But there's also so there's a bridge there, there's 100 wolves on it, then there's wolves just hovering 10 feet in the air, dozens of them, just ready to drop and take the place of wolves that fall, so they're in the shadow realm, and she's like, who knows how many more they have just waiting, so doesn't seem like great odds.
No.
Vittoria appears then and says that she was tired of waiting to meet Emilia, so came to get her. And Wrath is just like, you should surrender for murdering Vesta. And she's like, no. And they kind of go back and forth a little bit. And then Vittoria says that they obviously haven't heard what she can do and offers a demonstration. And Emilia's just like, no, wait, talk to us first. Like, you've been accused of murder, but I can clear your name. And Vittoria's like, why would I care? And she says she's done playing by the rules of the princes.
Oh, yes, those rules of the princes. Like, what rules has she been following?
Yeah. So Vittoria then, like, gets Domenico to stand in front of her, and he's a wolf in this moment. And she, like, bends her arm and whispers a spell, and lavender light swirls up and around her arm. And her arm turns, like, charred, and her fingers lengthen into claws, and dark veins start going up her arm, and I'm like, what the fuck is happening? And then she just pulls out Domenico's still beating heart, and he just flops over dead.
Fun trick.
And I was like, what the fuck is going on? Because I just thought he was dead.
Yeah.
Like you would. Someone pulls your heart out, you die. Surprise. And then Emilia in this moment realizes she's the one that killed the witches. She pulled their hearts out.
So that whole first book, they were chasing
she's
down
looking for the murderer.
The murderer of all those witches.
Yeah.
And it was her sister.
Wild. So Emilia basically is like, that was you. And she's like, Vittoria's just like, anyone can murder. But the true reason that she's feared and that they all want to cage her is this. So she, like, magics Domenico's body back up and then shoves his heart back in, and he's just fine and dandy, like, alive again.
I wonder if it hurts.
It must. It has to hurt the first time, right?
I've never had my heart pulled out by the goddess of death.
No, that's true. Yeah. I think it happens again later to someone else, and I think it does hurt. So anyway, Vittoria then tells Emilia that they are gods and they are feared, and nothing can stand against them when they're united, and it's time for Emilia to come home and for her power to awaken. And Emilia thinks to herself, like, Wrath is her home, and that is her choice. And she asks Vittoria what if she refuses to go, and Vittoria says they'll find another way to free her power. And then she calls Wrath kerosene and pulls out a dagger. And I'm like, there it is. There's the fucking dagger.
Mm-hmm.
And then she says she's the spark to ignite it. So Wrath is kerosene and she's going to ignite it. And then Emilia just says, like, he unleashes his power and the wolves attack. So she stands, like, still watching Wrath for a second and is, like, admiring his fighting. Like, you need to do something. But he's, like, killing people quickly, and he sends out a pulse of magic, and she knows it's a signal. And the horses that were on the carriage start attacking, and they have, like, metal teeth. So they're, like, killing wolves, too. And Emilia starts to fight then, finally. And she says it's as if she's always known how. So, you know, of course. Because she's the goddess of fury. She obviously fought. But it's like, it's one of those born moments. One of those, like, I guess, muscle memory. Because you have memories that you don't have anymore. I wonder if it would actually work.
I know that muscle memory is a thing. But, like, if you were in danger and you legit forgot, like, due to amnesia or some shit.
Yeah.
Would you physically remember if you were, like, a black belt in karate?
Yeah. That's why I like I like Chuck because they downloaded
Yes.
it. It's different. That was a good show. Anyway, Emilia is fighting, obviously, like hand-to-hand combat. She has her knife, dagger thing, which I'm like, this seems like a small thing. How are you actually killing any wolves with it? But okay. She thinks there's still a wall between her and her magic, and it's holding her back. But she, like, vows in this moment that she's going to get to the bottom of this, because she obviously doesn't want to feel powerless. Victoria's kind of, like, disappeared from the battle and is very much doing, like, the villain thing of, like, waiting to the side for them to kill each other. And Emilia and Wrath are, like, fighting together and helping each other, and they're, like, back to back and, like, protecting each other, which is cute. Then, I guess his signal earlier, they're like 4 3-headed hellhounds show up, and they're the size of elephants, which is terrifying. And they join the battle, and then, like, they start winning against the wolves. And then Vittoria screams her name, and she, like, looks away for a second, and a wolf attacks her, and, like, tears her chest to threads almost, it seems like. It's like, that was really bad, but she'll be fine, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So Wrath immediately kills the wolf and then tries to help Emilia up, but ends up getting stabbed with a glowing blade.
Oh,
We're like,
no.
I'm like, oh my god, this is not good. Victoria then says, like, so many people are searching for the Blade of Ruination. And Amelia's looking at Wrath, and he's, like, not healing. And she's like, what the fuck is going on? So Emilia asks Victoria to stop and heal him, which, like, I guess she could, because she's the goddess of death.
Could she, though, if he's not, like, I guess if he's...
I
don't know what are her powers, like...
I don't understand anything. What is, like... I don't see the equivalency between fury and death. Like, if you're a goddess over death and can, like, take someone's heart out and put it back in, that seems like a more amazing, in the, like, biblical term amazing, than being able to
get mad.
Get mad.
Like... Well, so I guess we haven't really seen it up to this point, but yeah. Emilia has some very impressive fire magic.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, and it's pretty severe.
Yeah.
So I guess that's her equivalency. And when she does get it back at, like, sort of full strength, I'll say, she says that, like, it is literally a bottomless well. Mm-hmm. So, like, she's very powerful. And I feel like the whole thing of, like, matching death and fury is it's more like two sides of a vengeance, like two aspects of vengeance. Like, when you seek vengeance, what do you want? You're pissed and you want their death.
Yeah. Okay. I get that. It just seems like her power isn't completely explained. Death at this point. No. So I'm just like, what? Can she do anything other than the pull her put back in? Like, obviously I'm sure she can, but it's like, because it seems like they're witches too. Like, they're goddesses, but they still have some of the witches' power, because witches are descended from goddesses. So, like, it's just interesting.
Yes.
I want to know more about their powers, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, she's begging Victoria to stop and to heal him, and Victoria just, like, kicks him, and then she, like, hits him in the head with the dagger, and she's like, is this making you mad? And making her mad like only a sister can, while also killing her husband. And then she puts the blade to his throat and asks what it will take to wake up Emilia's magic. And Emilia just, like, detonates, is what she calls it. And she doesn't try to control it. Fury completely overwhelms her, and she just becomes like a pillar of rose gold flame. And there's a protective ring that surrounds her, Wrath, Vittoria, and Domenico. And everything else, except for Wrath's horses and his hounds, somehow. Maybe they're fireproof? I don't know. But
who knows?
Yeah. Everything else, and I guess everyone else, like all the wolves start to burn unless they can immediately get into the shadow realm. And like, I don't know how you do that, so who knows?
You jump.
Yeah, so everything is starting to burn. And then the bridge is starting to melt underneath them, and Emilia just thinks like she's going to take her sister down to die in the water below them, which is now boiling because she's burning. So she's like really overcome by this fury. But then sleep hits her face and she's like stops herself and like her magic stops and she goes to check on Wrath. And Vittoria says then that the Blade of Ruination was impossible to find. And I was like, wait, what?
Yep.
Because I thought it was the Blade of Ruination because I was like, of course it is. They bring it up last week and now this week it's here. Of course. But Vittoria says she made a poison strong enough to bring down an immortal. But lying worked just as well. And she's like, I'm a goddess of death. Of course I'm good with a poison. I'm like, I love it.
Yeah. I also just love how cheeky it was for her to be like, I know they're terrified of it, so I'll just pretend I have it.
Well, it's a good thing he said to her last week what it was. Last week to us, like, last night for her?
Yes.
Like,
yep. And she was like, I don't want to have sex anymore. Let's go find this blade. I don't know where to start looking, but let's go.
I immediately thought that Vittoria had it when we heard about it. But, yeah. But only because I was like, nobody can find it. I was like, of course, she's going to have it. But I am surprised where her storyline goes in, like, a few, like, by the third week.
Yes.
In a good way. But anyway, we're still on this week. So she basically says that lying worked just as well. And Emilia is pissed, and she's about to, like, go off again in her fiery flame stuff. But Vittoria just says sleep. And as Emilia is falling asleep and just literally falling, Wrath, like, rallies and says her name, but she ends up passing out. So she wakes up in an underground cell, and there's, like, roots above her from a tree, bars in front of her, and her chest is still hurting because she got
shredded by a
clawed.
By a wolfie.
Oh yeah, and Domenico during that also like pulled her away from Wrath before Vittoria attacked Wrath and like bit her shoulder, which is something I forgot to say.
Yeah.
That he brings up later, and it's just like this must be an Easter egg for a different book. I'm sure it is when he brings it up later.
Okay.
Unless it happens at the end of this book, which I haven't read yet. But so yeah. She goes to touch the bars and try to use her magic against it, but like the bars are painful, and she notices like it absorbs her magic, and that just makes the bars stronger, which is like super smart. So she yells out for Vittoria, but then Envy responds. And I was like, interesting. Where did Envy come from? Was he not at the meeting? Because
I don't think he
think he was at the meeting.
I don't think him and Greed get along. So I don't think he's invited.
Yeah. And then I was like, well, was he here and that's why he didn't go? So, who knows? So Envy calls her a shadow witch, and then he asks if she remembers eavesdropping on him about the Stars of Seven. And she looks at him, and he has a hole in his shirt, and she's like, Vittoria tore his heart out. And he just says it grew back just as black and shriveled as it was before, which I love. Yep. And he says Vittoria is actually obsessed with him after he refused her and her alliance. And she asks then if, like, Vittoria asked him for an alliance after Greed or before, and he says it was after. I don't know why that's important, but maybe we'll get more on that.
There's a couple of times there that some things are mentioned that I don't think is really necessary.
Yeah. So he tells her wound looks infected, and she's like, well, there's not much I can do about it.
How did it get infected so fast?
I guess, were they, like, dirty claw? Like, I don't know.
Doesn't matter. It's been like 20 minutes.
I know. Well, maybe she was asleep for hours. I don't know. It seems wild. So she asks him then why he calls her a shadow witch, and she tells him she knows who she is, and she forces, like, her eyes to reveal to him by, like, becoming furious. And he says, he tells her then that she's immortal, and she's like, I'm not healing. And he's says it's because she doesn't really have her full power yet, but he says immortality will always win out, even if you only have a drop of it. So I'm like, that's interesting. What does that mean? Because she's not healing.
It's like, what drop of immortality is going to win out here?
Yeah, exactly. But we get an answer shortly. So he finally explains. He says he calls her Shadow Witch. Shadow is because she doesn't have her full power, and Witch because she's not fully a goddess. So, like, that's the reason. And he tells her he couldn't say all of this before because of the curse. So obviously something has changed. And she asks if it was her marriage. And she shows him her tattoo. And he says he's surprised that Wrath lost control at a rival court because that's something he vowed to never do again. And I'm like, interesting. What happened before? Mm-hmm. But she just says emotions were high. And I'm like, yeah, they were.
They were something, all right.
And then he kind of like, I kind of feel like he can tell that Vittoria's here in this moment because he's just like, don't mistake my boredom for friendship. And she's like, if I didn't think you'd attack me, I'd call it kindness. And he's like, no, everything he does is selfish, and it always will benefit his true goal, and to never forget that. And when stuff happens later, like, I kind of get what he's saying, but I'm also like, I think he likes her. Not in like a platonic way.
I think he does too. I think that he wants a friend.
Yeah. So, I kind of like them. But then Vittoria shows up, and she says she thinks he actually believes that. Because, like, he can't lie, so, like, he would have to believe it to say it, you'd think. Emilia looks at Vittoria then, and she thinks there must be some humanity left in her. And Vittoria's just like, you reek of hope. And she hates it. It's sad. And this is where I was like, oh no, this is turning bad, and it's making me sad. Emilia asks where Wrath is, and Vittoria just, like, scans her. And then she asks why Wrath can feel through their matching tattoo where she is, but she can't feel where he is. And Emilia thinks to herself she isn't sure if that's true now. And I'm like, interesting, go on. And she doesn't. Nope. Envy cuts in and asks Vittoria to get to the point so they can continue plotting her demise, which I just love. And Vittoria says that Emilia would never hurt her. And he's like, after hurting her love and her, he's like, she's probably planning a way to get back to him. And Vittoria says that, like, she would never go against her because they're blood. And I'm like, oh my god, she's a bit crazy in this moment.
Yep.
Envy then says that Wrath is Emilia's fate, and she is his fate. And then he says, as above, so below. They are the balance, light and dark, one fallen from above, and one created in the underworld below. And Emilia thinks, like, those words just feel right to her, which is interesting. And then Envy asks if she listened when she invaded his house and fucked his second. And I'm like, listen to what? But he tells her she cannot win against love. It's more powerful.
Aww.
And then Emilia, I know it's sweet. And I'm like, I want to know more about Envy.
Yeah, he's like, it seems like he's rooting for them.
Yeah. And then Emilia actually remembers her Nonna saying love would guide her. And she thought it meant her family, but now she's not so sure. And she said it to her actually after Emilia was marked by Wrath, which is interesting. When they were in her house, that was the first book. When she saw the mark on her, she was like, love will guide you. So I'm like, what did she mean by that? But Vittoria continues to like argue with Envy and says Emilia's head will be turned like Pride's was. And Envy asks if his head was actually turned. I'm like, what are you talking about? Because he isn't sure. And anyway, they're kind of like, there's a lot of stuff that I'm just like, I don't understand what they're talking about. Maybe we'll get more. But Vittoria says she won't permit her sister to be bound by foolish constraints like love and fate. And Envy says he'd love to see Vittoria stop her. And Emilia just like casts a truth spell and kind of like, I guess when you cast a truth spell, you kind of have to like force your will on the other person at the same time. So she makes Vittoria's nose bleed because like, I guess she's trying to fight her off so much. But she asks Vittoria where Wrath is, and she says that he's at her temple on the Shifting Isles. And then she asks if she murdered Greed's commander, and she says she didn't. And then she asks if she hired somebody to do it. But the magic is like receding, so Vittoria doesn't have to tell her. And then Vittoria tells Emilia that she'll regret that. And
very villain, like, you're gonna regret that.
It is very villain-like. I was like, oh, she is actually the villain of this book. And Emilia just says that Vittoria's soon gonna regret locking her up and keeping her from Wrath. And Envy just says that he warned her. Which is interesting.
I feel like it's he warned Vittoria, maybe. Like, I warned you, like, as in when she was like, oh, we're blood, she's not gonna hurt me. And he's like, you're keeping her from Wrath.
Yeah, it's like, I think the same thing, but I'm just like, Vittoria's a full goddess. Like, what is Emilia really gonna do?
I guess.
But I guess it's the wedge being driven between them is the real issue. Emilia then asks if she sent the skull to Greed, and Vittoria just says, like, anyone with the spell could do that, even, like, a prince could send it. And she also asks if any of Vittoria's wolves have gone missing, and she's just like, why so many questions? And Emilia actually explains to her about werewolf blood. And then she asks if Vittoria remembers Vesta. But Emilia can kind of tell somehow in this moment that she doesn't want to speak in front of Envy. So she's kind of like being guarded about it. But I'm also like, I don't think she wants to tell her either. And then Emilia asks why she's here, and Vittoria says she's here to accept her full power and shed her mortality and punish their enemies and reclaim their house.
Tall order.
Right?
They got a lot of stuff to do.
So much. So she actually thinks of Envy saying that there were 8 houses when he was like under the wine truth spell and he was talking to her. And a memory is kind of materializing of House Vengeance, but she can't remember anything else other than, I guess, the name. And then Vittoria says, like, that's for another time, but Envy wants to know more because apparently no prince has ever been there. And this is what Vittoria means about taking back what's theirs from birth, and why why Emilia shouldn't join House Wrath. And Emilia then asks, like, what does she mean by shedding mortality? And Vittoria says she just needs to remove the mortal heart she was given. And they wanted them tamed and to have mortality. And that's why she has a mortal heart. And Vittoria tells her she knows who did it. And she says, like, but Emilia won't accept it. And then Emilia says, Nonna wouldn't. And Vittoria says it was a human sacrifice. And, right? And Emilia can hardly believe it because, like, their Nonna hated dark magic. But it's like, I guess it makes sense. I guess the whole thing is they took out the human hearts and put them in the goddesses, and they were like, they'll die someday. Hurrah.
I guess.
It's just, yeah. It's something. Emilia thinks, like, she just wants the heart gone. But Envy says she isn't ready yet, and he says that she might not survive, which is interesting, and
Didn't he just say a one drop of immortality wins out?
Yeah. I kind of wonder if he can lie. Like, he's not supposed to be able to, but, like, there's a few things that he said that I'm like, can he just lie? I don't know.
It would be an interesting twist if he could.
Yeah. But Vittoria says that she lived, and he's just like, well, you're the goddess of death. Of course you lived.
A valid point.
Very valid. So, like, maybe he does believe it. Maybe it is, like, if you believe something, then it's true to you. So maybe he's learned how to, like, wrap that somehow to his advantage. Like, if he believes that she could die, he can say it. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
And then Emilia asks Vittoria why she doesn't just take her heart, but Vittoria says she needs to choose it. And if she doesn't choose it, she'll die immortal just like they intended.
Yikes.
And, yeah, basically. But she does say, like, taking off their amulets began a chain reaction to them learning who they are. And that spell books whispered to Vittoria and taught her how to remove her spell lock. And then Emilia asks, like, how they were actually children. And Vittoria asks her if she remembers traveling to that cabin in the woods with no memory of getting there. And we kind of talked about that last book. The first time she was in a carriage in this book, she was like, I should have been in a carriage before in my childhood, but I don't remember it. So, I don't know, we kind of talked about it, found it odd. But this is why, because she never was. But she says that, like, it felt like here. And she asks if their parents knew. And this is kind of when I was like, are her parents even real? But Vittoria's just like, I'll come back later and see if you're ready. And then she says, you better decide soon because Wrath won't last long. And her wounds need to be healed. So, like, she's also dying. And then Emilia says, like, Vittoria could just bring her supplies to fix up her wounds. But Vittoria's just like, she could, but she's not going to.
Yeah.
So Envy asks if she remembers the Stars of Seven, which he mentioned when she first came in. And then he asks if she remembers where she found the Seven Sisters. And I was like, thank you, because I did not remember what he was talking about.
Who were the Seven Sisters? I still don't remember.
He wanted her to find the mirror. She found the Seven Sisters of Fate. The crone told her where to go in book 2.
Sure.
Yeah. Like, his whole thing was, he was like, I want to find the mirror. And she was like, why? But I forget what the mirror even told her. Oh, that's where she saw Vittoria for the first time in the mirror.
Right. And, like, it was in a tree.
Yes.
In the Sin Corridor.
Yes. So.
Okay.
They're underneath that tree at the moment.
That's fun for them.
Yes. So that's what he's telling her. But he tells her, too, the only way to get into the tree is to have goddess blood. And also, the tree just moves around wherever. So, like, it's not in the Sin Corridor right now. So, no one can find them here if the tree keeps moving. So, they need to actually find a way to escape.
That sucks.
Yeah. Inconvenient.
Yeah, it's pretty awkward.
Yeah. They start scheming, I guess, and Envy offers to basically fuck Vittoria. And he's like, hopefully we can somehow both escape while I
distract her with my penis.
Yeah. And it's like, not a very smart idea. He's like, I'll seduce her and then get her over there and then push her and we'll run out and lock her in her. I don't think that's going to work. Like, you stand by the entrance and when she comes in, run. Like, okay. And then they hear a cough. And Amelia's like, what the fuck? You didn't tell me there was someone here. He's like, I woke up like seconds before you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's Antonio, who was in the first book. He was the priesty guy. Not a priest. What was he?
He was a monk.
A monk, yeah.
That, or a brother.
What? A brother, yeah. So he is over there and he starts talking and he says that, and we already know that Vittoria is the one that killed the witches, but in the first book we find out that it's him that killed the witches.
Yeah, he took the fall for it, I guess.
Yeah, so now he's kind of explaining it. So he says that Vittoria promised that he'd see his mother again, so he pretended that he was the one that killed the girls. And he thought that Vittoria must have been an angel of death. She did her whole little trick thing where she killed Domenico, then brought him back. And he assumed that she would do that with his mother, that she could just bring anybody back.
Right.
And he actually thought that she would bring the witches that she killed back, too. Like, he didn't think that she'd keep them dead. But he says she wanted vengeance against the families. And Emilia starts to kind of wonder if there's actually anything redeemable about Vittoria in this moment, which I kind of appreciate, but I was also like, oh no. And she tells Antonio that Vittoria deceived her too. And then he tells them that Domenico is always guarding Vittoria. So, like, they're immediately like, shit, our plan's out the window, because if they run, they're just going to run into a wolf.
Yes. Although you would think that a demon prince would have something on him. You would think he would have something to fight with.
Well, you know. His dick. But then he says there are also several other wolves that are usually around too, and lately there's a new one who is wilder and more feral than the other ones.
I wonder.
And Domenico is on edge when she's around.
Interesting.
And you're like, I wonder who that could be.
Yes, it's not obvious at all.
Right? So Emilia asks if she's here now. Because we're all assuming it's Vesta, right? Like,
yeah,
that's what we're assuming. Yep. So I assume that she's on the same page, and she's like, maybe I can talk to her or figure some shit out. But anyway, there's a terrible sound, and then Vittoria steps around with Antonio's heart in her hand and says he can go see his mother now. Okay. And Emilia is shocked, to say the very least. Victoria offers to bring him back because she's like, oh shit, did you want to fuck him? Like, is that why you're mad?
Like, obviously not. She's married now.
Right? But she's like, what else could it be? And Emilia just asks, like, what's wrong with Vittoria? And she says she's doing what she was created to do and asks when Emilia will do the same. And she magics his heart into a jar and then away. And Emilia thinks of, like, when she had hypothermia, she had a dream of, like, a wall of hearts and jars. She's like, that's related to her sister. So it all is getting cleared up, all these visions and shit. But like I said, it's another reason that you like want to reread the book because there's just so many things.
Yeah,
I
did not catch that at all.
I only did because she said it.
I read it and I still went past it. So
yeah. Vittoria then says she told him he would see his mother again. She didn't tell him that she would bring his mother back. So she's like, I didn't lie to him. And it's like, nah, you let him on.
But maybe you shouldn't kill people.
Yeah.
For no reason.
Yeah. So Emilia tells her to bring him back, or she'll never help her get their house back. And Vittoria offers his heart for Emilia's. And Envy cuts in then and is just like, because he said earlier he doesn't know if she'll live through it, so like he doesn't want her to give up her heart, I guess. But he asks how Vittoria feels about their mother loving her sister more than he loves her. And he says he imagined she'd be envious. And he starts using his magic and I guess to try to pull more envy from her.
Right.
Vittoria then says, like, their mother created them to watch over the underworld and then she left. Like, she isn't here. She doesn't care about either of them. She's like, what are you talking about? And then Emilia notices someone in the shadows and she assumes that Envy is just, like, distracting Vittoria.
But, like,
hoping this person will save them.
Don't they know that the crone is their mother?
Not yet. We'll find out, like, right now.
Oh, my bad.
Well.
Whoopsie. I thought Emilia knew.
No.
Oh, okay.
She finds out right now.
Oh, okay. My bad. Sorry.
Victoria definitely knew.
Okay.
Who it was.
Well, because I guess I'm just saying if she knew who it was and she's like, she left, she's not here. Does she not know that she has a cottage in Wrath's, like, territory?
Why don't you let me tell you what happens in this part?
I'm sorry. How have I forgotten already?
So, Envy says to Vittoria that a house wrath is a peculiar choice for someone uninterested in one of her in her daughters, or one of them. And then he says she was the matron of curses and poisons. And Emilia just says Celestia, and not just in answer to Envy, because she's realizing who it is in the moment, but also because she's actually standing behind Vittoria. And she summons Roots to, like, bind Vittoria, and then says, hello, daughter. So, I think this was the, like, reveal.
Oh. Whoops.
Vittoria basically is like, let me go, and she doesn't, and she dissolves the bars, and Emilia goes over to, like, see Antonio, because she's in shock still, and she begs Celestia to bring him back. But she obviously says she can't. His heart has stopped now. Like, when she put the heart back into Domenico, it was still beating. Like,
right.
Even Vittoria, I don't think, could bring him back now. He wouldn't come back as himself. I think we heard about it last book, that, like, you'd come back different. And Emilia basically just collapses and just starts to cry about everything. About Wrath, about, like, no closure or forgiveness with her childhood crush, and then his death, and her twin, and now she thinks she's unredeemable. And, like, she tried to avenge Vittoria because she loved her, and now Vittoria is the source of all of this, all of her issues in this one moment, basically.
Yeah.
It's all too much, really, but Envy comes over and he puts out his hand and tells her to rise, just as they always feared she would. And she feels that he can understand, and he helps her up, and she says, thank you. And he says, it benefits him so not to be too grateful. But she's like, that can't be the whole truth. And it, like, I get it is true because of what happened, but also I'm like, there's more to him.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's why there's a book about him, because now I want to know more about him. Celestia says that the wolves have been, like, I guess, sent to the Shadow Realm for an hour. she, like, forced them there, I guess.
Amazing.
And, yeah. And also says not to forget to give her book back to her. And Emilia thinks she's glad it's in her satchel. And I'm like, but where's her satchel?
But, like, she hasn't been using the book.
I know, but where, I just am like, she's glad it's in her satchel, but I'm like, is the satchel in, like, Wrath's house? Or does she have it with her here? Give it to her now. Like, this was my worry at the end of last book. I was like, you need to give her the book immediately.
Yeah.
Just give her the book. But anyway. Okay. So Envy and Emilia run, and they end up in the mirror room upstairs, I guess, in the tree. Which doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. I guess there's stairs, like, I don't know. Get from under the roots inside, whatever. And she grabs her dagger, which is basically where the mirror was last time she was there. And she asks Envy about the temple and if he knows where it is. And he transvideos them to the Sin Corridor. And Emilia thinks she needs to find Wrath, then clear her sister's name, or make her pay for her crimes. So, interesting. So, yeah, they end up at the gates of hell in the Sin Corridor, and Envy goes to open them, but it won't work with his magic or his blood, and she asks if hers will work, but he says her kind is likely locked out too. And she asks why Wrath would lock them, but he says it's actually the Star Witches, which makes her think of her Nonna. Her Nonna said that they were Star Witches, and that meant that they were wardens of the Prison of Damnation. So right now, I guess, Wrath is outside of the gate, the circles of hell.
I don't... Like, how does she know that?
Because
like,
she knows...
Like, the last time she saw Wrath, they were in front of their house, and he was poisoned by Vittoria's dagger. And then Vittoria sent her under the tree. So, like, I don't understand why she's like, I need to get to Wrath, who's, like, what, she thinks he's in the mortal realm?
No, she knows, she asked Vittoria where he was, and she said, my temple. And then she said, it's on the Isle of...
The Shifting Isles.
The Shifting Isles, yeah. So, I don't really know how she knows that the Shifting Isles are outside of the realms of hell, because I would have assumed that they were inside. But anyway, apparently they're outside. I don't really understand why, based on what we learn in general later. But anyway, they're outside, sure. So she's currently stuck inside, he's currently stuck outside, and she starts to lose her shit. So she tries her blood, but it stays locked, and then she uses her power, but nothing happens. And she says, I guess to Envy or out loud, just a statement, that Nonna can't be the villain. And Envy responds that in, like, Nonna's perspective, she's the villain. And Nonna thinks that, like, according to the prophecy, Emilia and Vittoria are the ones that are bad, quote unquote.
Yeah, we're getting into a whole existential crisis now. Like, who's the villain?
Yeah. Amelia says she wouldn't hurt anyone, but then she thinks that she knows it's a lie, and it's like, obviously it's a lie. And then she just switches topics and asks Envy if he would use werewolf blood to hide a murder. And he says it would just piss off the wolves because they would smell the truth and then they would be after the murderer. So, like, they can distinguish between their blood and the actual murderer. So, interesting. And then she asks if he thinks Vittoria killed Vesta, but he says she's actually just creating a whole bunch of chaos. Like, she's pissing off Greed and the werewolves and himself. Like, she broke into his house and she's pissing off the vampire court, and, like, she's mocked Pride, and Vittoria's like, what the hell's going on? So she's doing a whole bunch of shit. But then he tells her there's a secret portal to the Shifting Isles, and you're like, of course there fucking is. And he's like, have your dagger ready, and then he transvenios them again. And there's, like, a bunch of Umbra demons in front of a gate, and she's like, oh, this is Pride's
How does
house.
she know that?
She was there once, I guess.
Know. To me, that's not a good enough reason.
I know. So, yeah, there's just a bunch of Umbra demons there, and she's just like, so you don't have an invitation, do you? And he's like, no, but Pride will be reasonable. And, like, she's there still bleeding from her chest and infected and, like, a disaster. And he says there's a portal on the edge of Pride's circle. A demon, one of the Umbra demons, tells her to go back to her castle until her prince rescues her and calls her a little princess. And it's just like,
I don't like that.
Pride knows who she is, even if she doesn't know who she is.
But,
so,
like, don't they all know who she is? Like,
yeah.
Wouldn't everybody in the court know who she is? And yet, like, that guy in was it the second book? That guy, Wrath, cut his hands off. He was still being a dick to her, being like, oh, and being all, like, sexual and terrible. I'm like, you're doing that to a goddess? She might not remember right now, but she will.
Yeah, do you think, like... No, because it's even been less time here than it was for her. Because we get next week, it's like, at most, 6 years.
Yeah.
So, like, what the fuck? Because I was like, oh, maybe there was staff turnover. Maybe he's new. Oh, that's annoying. Anyway, it's stupid. Envy laughs and says he shouldn't have flung the match because she'll burn him.
Yikes.
And the demons go to attack, but she's faster, and she uses her, like, flowers and vines and, like, holds them down and, like, explodes a flower through one of their throats, and they, like, die choking on their own blood. And you're like, good.
That's amazing.
Envy kind of warns her that a demon's coming up behind her, and it says her prince must not have taught her to fight, and too bad, because he'll be replaced soon. And and she asks what it knows, and it says her beloved will be dead soon, and she'll be nothing, and calls her a divine whore. Of course, because of course.
I know, they gotta go for the, like, slut whore thing.
Mm-hmm. So she cuts his head off, like you would. And then Envy says to remind him not to call her any nasty names without armor and a casting of a protective spell or 12 first. And she just says, like, it wasn't what he said about her, it was what he said about Wrath. And she tells him she can't bear imagining a world without him. Which is sweet.
But and still, I'd be pretty pissed if someone called me a,
Yeah, divine whore. Although, divine. I'm joking. He asks if Wrath can't give her his heart, would she still fight for him? And I'm like, what the fuck does this mean? What does this mean? I know now, but at the time I was like, what the fuck? But she says she can only hope one day he won't have to ask her, that her actions will speak louder than her words. And that makes her think of Wrath's tattoo from the second book that we were both like, ugh. But I guess I kind of get it now that we know some more things about him, but still. So she takes the head of the one that called her divine whore and just walks towards the castle. And Envy just looks at her like he's a little bit frightened of her.
Good.
Yeah, I like
it. So, because she is holding a head, Pride's court accepts her in. And she brings the head to court, to the throne room where Pride is sitting, doing what he does. Obviously she, like, throws some of her fire magic around, too, to, like, because they're like, we don't want to announce you, you're holding a head, and you have not been invited. And she's like, fire magic.
She's also covered in blood, too.
Yeah.
And, like, bleeding out.
She's not looking great. So obviously his throne room is a huge hall of mirrors, like, straight out of Versailles.
Mm-hmm.
And, like you said, she's looking very disheveled. There are people here. They're all, like, looking at her. And, like, they all align with... they all align with Pride. So, of course, they're all like, ugh, sneering at her for looking disheveled. But, like, she just didn't even care. She's like, I just need to get to Wrath.
Yeah.
So, Pride welcomes her and Envy and degrades them for looking trashy. But again, Emilia ignores it. And, like, she, like, gives as good as she gets and just, like, teases him for being, like, the worst.
Yeah.
She asks if she can use his portal to bring her husband back to his house. And Pride's like, maybe he should stay where he is. And Emilia's she's tired. She's in pain. And she essentially told Pride that if he didn't let her pass and use his portal, she would return with the might of Wrath's army, and not one person would stand in between her and her husband. And she will burn his kingdom to the ground. And she said, and it's more than a promise, it's a vow. And then she drips a drop of blood on his floor, which is like a blood vow. And he's like, people don't usually make blood vows. They're quite serious. And she's like, I know.
You idiot.
But, like, I wonder how she's gonna get the might of Wrath's army. Are they gonna listen to her?
She's goddess.
I guess.
She's his consort. She's going to get him, so, like, a Nier would follow.
Yeah, that's probably true, yeah. So Pride is like, I don't think you understand how serious a blood vow is.
Mm-hmm.
But before he can sort of continue on with their conversation, she feels and hears the sound of an impending storm and, like, sees the weather change out the window. And then Wrath walks in.
Love it.
And she wanted to, like, race to him and hug him and love on him, but she stays calm and collected. Because he's pissed. And so she's like, we have to remain, like, composed in front of other people. He demands to know the meaning of this.
Fair.
And I was like, meaning of what? And I think the fact that they didn't immediately welcome the queen with open arms, like, is that the meaning of this?
I don't know.
But, like, then Pride says, like, they were testing her true motives. And I just think this is the weakest... I think this is a very weak plot device. I don't know why it's in here. Like, I don't know what it's for.
Yeah, I kind of assumed that her and her sister did something much worse than they did, because, like...
They did something really crappy.
Do I
however
know
many years ago? I don't know.
Do I know about it yet? I might not know about it.
So, like, they're saying, you know, they wanted to test her true motives, I guess, to make sure that she was all in it.
Yeah.
But, like, they didn't involve Wrath in any way. They just decided to test her.
Yeah, but he wouldn't have agreed to it.
No, but they were just like, we're gonna test her for you, brother. Like...
But I think they were testing to find out if she was gonna fuck them over, too.
I guess. Anyway, Envy was also in on it.
Yeah.
So
that's why all of his... it's all about my whatever.
Yeah. And she was like, were you even really kidnapped, or was that all a ruse?
Did you pull your own heart out?
Anyway, and she was like, maybe you're working with Vittoria still. But Envy tells her the plan was actually to attack them with Umbra demons after they left Greed's house. But Vittoria just got there first with her wolves.
Good.
I'm like, this is very coincidental. And both Envy and Ride, not Pride, Ride. Envy and Pride both talk about how it serves both of their best interests to have done this. And, like, Wrath is really pissed because Vittoria's out there jaunting around sowing discord. And, like, they should be trying to protect the peace of their kingdoms instead of testing Emilia for loyalty at this moment in time. Like, it's just poor timing.
Yeah. I guess the test really wasn't that big of a deal, though, because it was really just those few demons at the front gate. Because they didn't do any of their other stuff. I don't know.
But I think Wrath is also equally annoyed that, so, like, she legit got kidnapped.
Yeah.
And so did Envy. They legit got kidnapped. And when they had a chance to be free, instead of actually, like, bringing her back to Wrath, or, like, bringing her to be looked at because she is injured, Envy was like, well, let's continue this trickery and bring her to see if she can try and get to Wrath. You know what I mean? So it's like,
yeah,
Wrath is probably pissed that they, like, didn't take care of her, maybe?
I guess. But I also think, like, originally he would have taken her out of the front gate of hell and brought her to Wrath. I think he would have. Because that was what he tried to do, and then he was like, there's a portal in Pride's land. I think he was just being, like, opportunistic.
Yeah. I think it was stupid.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's just, like, I don't know. It's not... I guess I'm not 100% sure if I know what the fuck is going on. But I just don't really... I've heard a few things, and, like, I don't know. I just feel like it's not a good enough reason to test her. I don't know.
No, you're right. So Pride keeps trying to justify his actions, and in his rant, he mentions if Greed gets mad that this test has sidetracked his investigation with Vesta, he can deal. Because it's no secret that Vesta wasn't happy in Greed. So then Emilia gets, like, her detective glasses on.
Jesus Christ.
She's like, I'm sorry, what? Vesta wasn't happy? How do you know that? And he says, because I slept with her. And she was like, what? You slept with her? He was like, yeah, like a week or so ago. She came looking for me. And
he's so stupid.
He is so stupid because he was like, she came looking for me. She couldn't get enough. I'm so awesome.
Yeah.
But then drops that, like, because I guess Emilia was like, what did you guys talk about? And apparently Vesta was asking him about the ball that they were at and the wine. And then the portal, and then Pride's bedroom. So, like, the dude's a moron. She obviously was fishing for information on his secret portal. Probably 100%. Got the information, slept with him as a cover, and then left.
Yeah.
So, like, the guy is an absolute... I don't even have a word.
Fuckboy. He's not the right word.
He's a dum-dum.
Yeah. Not very bright.
Yeah. And then Emilia's like, what did she want to know about the portal? And he just said she wanted to know if it was secure and like if it only goes to the Shifting Isles. It's like, God, you idiot.
Where do you think she is?
So Emilia wanted to ask more questions, but Pride started getting annoyed.
Well, and defensive.
Yes.
It felt like.
Yeah. So her and Wrath were like, let's leave because she is still, like, bleeding.
And infected, apparently.
And infected. In, like, an hour, she got infected.
Yeah.
And now she's like, I don't think Vesta's actually dead.
No shit.
Yeah. So Wrath transvenios them not to his house, but to the Crescent Shallows. Last book, they got a little hot and heavy in there, but she also got real sick.
Well, the worst pain she's ever felt in her entire life.
Yeah. So she's slightly nervous about getting in again, but the Crescent Shallows has healing properties, so, like, she needs to get in.
Yeah.
And he tells her that, like, the reason she got sick the last time is because she was wearing his wings. Those necklaces, the cornellos? Cornicellos?
Cornicellos. Something like that.
So she's not wearing them this time, so she should be okay. So they get in. Turns out her wound is infected, but the Shallows will heal it. And again, how did it get infected so fast? But that's fine. She asked how he got away, because again, last she saw, he was stabbed with a poison dagger and was, like, left for dead with a bunch of wolves.
Good.
But then he's like, oh, I always carry an antidote.
Cool. Sure. Thanks.
So, yeah. So apparently he was taken to the temple. But because he has an antidote on him at all times, he waited for the wolves for daytime, because then the wolves were all human, took the antidote, and he snuck out of the temple and walked on foot to the portal. So then, then she just is like, okay, that's fine. And then she's like, what did I do to betray you? She just, like, swaps it real quick. Because I guess she wants to know why Envy and Pride were testing her. But he's just like, oh, don't worry about it, it's fine.
Okay.
Then she's like, why do I need to heal? Aren't I immortal and I'll heal anyway? And he's like, but you're not fully. So her wound heals in the water, and she asks why he keeps going crazy to rescue her when she's kind of immortal. And he's just like, I'm not willing to take any chances. Then, like, this is just like a ping pong ball.
Yeah.
Because she's just thinking and talking about a bajillion different things. So then she thinks about how he just said, like, he doesn't want to take any chances with her getting hurt. But then she's thinking about how he hasn't asked her to complete their wedding vows. And she's like, I wonder why. Like, why hasn't he done that?
Yeah. She doesn't love him, she's worried.
Well, he doesn't, you mean he doesn't love her?
Yeah, that's what I meant.
So, he doesn't say anything after that, and just, obviously, they start making out. And she thinks about the way he's touching her as though he remembers her being wrenched away from him. And she is thankful not to have that memory. And she's like, I'm never going to let anyone tear us apart again.
Yay.
Yeah. So they keep making out, and he says he wants to be inside of her.
Sorry. Don't know why. That's funny.
But, like, so it's a really interesting moment, because he then goes underwater, wraps his arms around her waist.
Yeah, like he doesn't do what he just said he wanted to do.
No, he doesn't. He puts her legs around his shoulders. So essentially he's giving her, like, she's on his shoulders.
Yeah.
But reverse. So her vagine is up against his face, not his neck.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Right?
I just forgot about sitting on someone's shoulders like a normal person, because I was like, obviously this is what she's doing. So you're explaining it. I was like, how would she be up there with her butt in his face? So funny.
Yeah.
Good job, me.
Yeah. So then he doesn't. So initially I was like, he must get out of the pool, but he doesn't.
No.
He brings her over to, like, a spot that's got these stalactites, like, coming down from the ceiling for her to grab onto.
Safe.
And I guess, yeah, very safe. Like, I'm sorry. Do they have grip? Like, can you imagine just hanging on to pointy things? Your hand would slip off.
I imagine they're slippy.
And, like, she's wet. She was just in the water.
She is wet.
Yes.
Yes. You are correct.
I just feel like it's not as hot as, like, when you think about the logistics.
Yeah.
It's not actually as hot as...
I want it to be.
Yeah. So, he puts her against the wall, she grabs onto the stalactites, and he eats her out until she comes.
Of course.
Then, they get out of the water, and he lowers her to the floor, and slowly enters her, and makes love to her until she comes again. Then, he starts going a little bit faster, and she comes a third time before he finally comes to. So, they'll stay in the lagoon, I'm calling it, for a while, laughing, playing in the water, splashing. They have sex again on the shore before going back to Wrath's room, and then they're going to sleep all cuddled up together.
Sweet.
Yeah. But of fucking course,
this is how it always happens.
Yeah, she wakes up in the fucking Shadow Realm to Domenico being a dick. But, unlike last time when she was naked, this time she actually has her little nightie that she wore to bed.
Good.
So, but she is still chained up.
Of course.
Like, you're not making a case for yourself here, girl, like, sister-wise.
100%, yeah.
So, Domenico teases her about her wound, because he's the one who gave it to her. And
it's so weird.
It is so weird, because he says an alpha's mark, which is him, when imbued with alpha magic, can make people, like, go into heat and just be turned on all the time.
Yeah.
So, like, he's essentially saying when he bit her, if he had put any of his magic into it, she'd be horny as fuck. Okay, great. Like, again, I don't really understand why we need to know it.
I know. I don't know.
She asks, like, where's Vittoria? And he just says she's on her way and she's bringing a guest. And when Vittoria arrives, the guest turns out to be Nonna. I know.
Sad.
Obviously, she was brought against her will, and she's all bruised and beaten. And that makes Emilia freak out, because in her mind, this is still the woman who raised her and taught her and consoled her and all that. But Nonna looks at Emilia, sees the tattoo on her ring finger and her nightgown, and just, like, looks at her with the cringes.
Yeah.
So Emilia's like, oh shit. She sees me as, like, the enemy.
Yeah, it's sad.
So Vittoria kicks Nonna. Like, just kicks her. Yeah. And Nonna starts whispering a spell for the goddess to protect her from Vittoria and Emilia.
Which goddess you fucking praying to? That's gonna pick you over the goddesses.
But also, it sort of annoys me because, like, the Nonna does not see that Emilia is chained and is, like, a captive.
Yeah.
But is still like, ugh, you're the worst. You twins. Yeah.
You twins.
You know what I mean? It's just like, have some fucking context.
Yeah, it's stupid.
Anyway, Vittoria told her that she found Nonna hexing the gates, which is why they can't leave the 7 circles right now. And Emilia just asks Nonna if any of their childhood was real. And soft Nonna comes out for like a split second.
Yeah.
And tells Emilia that she's sorry, but they did what they had to do. And I think she calls her like Bambina, or like, she used a little pet name. She says, I'm sorry, like,
yeah,
some like pet name, Bambina, but like, we did what we had to do. Emilia then asks if Nonna and the Coven actually sacrifice people for their spell lock, because apparently that's what they had to do. And she said the whole coven agreed, and it was sort of needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few situation. And Vittoria jumps in and demands that Nonna tell her the whole story, including what happened to Sophia Santorini. I don't understand why we need to know about Sophia Santorini.
Yeah.
Again, but it's fine, I guess. So apparently, if we're calling back to, like, the opening scene, and Sophia was, like, using dark magic to see the future, it was Nonna who like, came upon her and shattered the mirror and trapped her in her own mind.
Fucked her up.
Yeah. Because apparently she learned things that only Nonna and one other witch were allowed to know. So
it's like a terrible...
Yeah.
Like...
It was sort of a, like, oh, you get what you get and you don't get upset.
Yeah.
She then tells Emilia about Wrath and, like, what sort of, not the whole story, but that La Prima Striga cursed him to only hate, and that all that he loved would be taken from him. Yes. So that's his curse. However, when he was originally cursed, all he cared about was his wings.
Mm-hmm.
So he then cursed La Prima back, promising to take what she loves most. So I guess she didn't want him to be cursed. She didn't want his curse, and he didn't want her curse. So they were like, let's make a bargain instead of, like, these two curses. But nobody knows the terms of that bargain.
Yeah.
Then Nonna brings up the story of Pride and his wife. So Pride married La Prima's daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And La Prima was not happy about it and wanted her away from Pride. So she had an idea to pit Pride and Wrath against each other, thinking that it would make her daughter leave. And that's when Emilia started to remember her quote-unquote mission. So she remembers that she was sent to House Wrath with the mission of seducing him, while Vittoria, was sent to House Pride, and she was supposed to seduce Pride. Then, at the Feast of the Wolf, Wrath was supposed to walk in on Vittoria and Pride together, thinking it was Emilia. And then they were hoping that there would be a fight. Yeah. And actually, La Prima wanted to break her daughter's heart by having her see Pride cheat on her.
Which is kind of mean.
Yes.
Just a little bit.
Yeah. However, instead of going through with that plan, Wrath and Emilia fell for each other, and she felt bad about what was going to go down. So instead of letting him find Vittoria and Pride together, she took him to the garden for a little tryst.
Ooh.
Yes, and he confessed his love for her instead.
Love?
Mm-hmm. So Emilia remembered that she loved him too, and that's why she couldn't go through with the plan. And because Wrath confessed his love, Emilia was magically and immediately ripped from him, which is sad.
It is sad. But is this what they're talking about, that they're, like, testing her because originally she had not great motives, but, like, then she loved him?
Yeah. But, like, you got to think, so she was immediately ripped from him, and we're going to find out in a second, but then immediately got the spell lock put on her.
Yeah.
So, like, he does not know her yet. Like, they have not had a relationship yet based in honesty.
Oh, yeah. That's fair. But it's not like Wrath was trying to test her. It's like his bros are like, we did it for you.
Yeah.
It's like, I didn't ask for this.
Yeah. But it's true, though, because, like, both of them during that scene, it wasn't really super important, so I didn't bring it up. But they were like, tell us that you didn't have an inkling of doubt.
Yeah.
And he couldn't say anything. And, like, Emilia's like, I don't feel bad. Like, I don't feel bad about this because, like, if I were him and if I had betrayed him in the past, if he had betrayed me in the past, yeah, I'd probably have a little bit of doubt, too.
Well, and she thinks back, like, even last book, she had doubts about him.
Yeah.
Which was, like, what, 2 weeks ago? So.
So, Wrath was, like, going crazy, asking all of his brothers who was behind her disappearance. But Victoria is actually the one that found her with the witches. And Victoria, in the present, like now, told her that the witches wasted no time and immediately... Like, this is the part that I still don't understand. So, apparently they sacrificed twin witches and kept their hearts pumping through magic. And Emilia then remembers that there's a prophecy about twin witches and realizes that that prophecy was not about them. It was about the twins that were sacrificed for them.
Okay.
So, the twin witches apparently were babies and were born that night. What night?
I guess the night that she was taken?
And their hearts were put inside Emilia and Vittoria, creating their spell locks and their mortality. So
baby hearts.
So this is the part that I find exceedingly confusing. So Emilia's like reeling because she says out loud that Nonna raised us, and that now Nonna was their earliest memories, teaching them how to cook and bless amulets. But she said she was reeling because her grandmother brutally killed 2 innocent witches that she then went on to raise. So I'm so confused because we find out later that that this was really only 6.5 years. So I'm like...
Time's different in...
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we do get that later. Because there's a moment, I think, next week where we get something... And she's like, 6 years here, that could be 20 years in another realm. So, like, it's like a whole...
Okay, but here's my thing. The witches were babies. They took their hearts out and put those hearts in Emilia and Vittoria.
Grown-ass women.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, what I don't understand is that it kept their hearts pumping by magic. Like, as in... the transfer period. I don't understand where all of their childhood baby memories are coming from.
Yeah, I'm assuming they magicked them into children. Because I was kind of wondering, did they, like, stuff their souls into the babies instead? Because, like...
Yeah.
They do still have memories as children.
So this is what I'm saying. That's why I was confused. Because in my brain, I was like, so were the twins babies at the time? Or did they raise the babies and then with the spell take their hearts as like young women, put them in the girls, and then with that, all their memories of Nonna raising them?
No, I think she raised them as goddesses, but it does make me wonder if they were ever really, like, were they ever actually young, or was that all just like a...
That's what I mean. Like, were they actually children at one point?
But was that just a glamour? That they thought they were young or something? But they interacted with people around them. They had to have been young.
But how?
I don't know. I'm assuming magic. Magic explains everything away.
I just don't understand, because she says Nonna raised them.
I think she just means her and Vittoria.
No, because then she says she raised them, raised us. So, like, she's differentiating between the twins and her.
Oh. Yeah. I think the twins died as babies, as like 1 day old babies, and then they put their hearts into these grown women, and then the women were turned into babies.
Okay.
With magic.
Alright.
But it could have been explained better.
Yeah, because I was so lost at this explanation.
And that's just my assumption. I have no idea, obviously.
If you have any ideas, let us know.
Enlighten us.
So I guess after this whole, like, explanation, Emilia asked Nonna why she did it all, and she just said it was duty. Essentially, they were afraid of retribution from Emilia and Vittoria as vengeance goddesses, because La Prima's curse was keeping them apart. And La Prima refused to break the curse, so they were like, we're probably better off leaving these witches subdued.
And then hopefully they'll eventually die as mortals.
Yeah.
Like, what?
I know. So Emilia then remembered all the warnings that Nonna gave her about the wicked, and realized that they were hiding her from Wrath and doing everything they could to keep them apart.
Sad.
Yeah. Then she asked why the demons didn't know about her and Vittoria being twins. Because, like, you know, they were living...
parent trapping.
Yeah. But they were living in the underworld for, like, thousands of years.
Yeah.
But Vittoria explained that House Vengeance is actually separate from the Seven Circles by, like, this mountain range, and there's this magic fog that erases memories. So, like, they just never mingled before.
Mm-hmm. Which makes sense, because we were like, oh, wait, we don't know that yet. Never mind.
Okay. But Vittoria just thinks that, like, they're above demons, because they're goddesses.
Yeah.
And she didn't want to get involved in their squabbles.
Fair.
So
they may have started their squabbles.
Yeah. So Emilia then asked, well, okay, she knows how she got trapped. How did Vittoria get trapped? And Vittoria says, I went looking for you and found you lying on an altar with a hole in your chest, dripping blood. And they pounced on her. And it's funny because that's the same position Emilia found Vittoria in. And she realizes, like, it wasn't a message for her, like, as in hurt. She wasn't trying to hurt Emilia. It was I know what you did.
Yeah, it was a message for Nonna.
Yeah.
When, like, the heart being gone was like, yeah.
Yeah.
I just wonder, I kind of get it, but it also, like, why did that body stay there? Like, did she just get a new goddess body?
Who?
How did they find Vittoria's body with her heart missing?
Oh, that's a great question. She must have just, I don't know.
Pretended?
Maybe.
It must have been a glamour. Everything is magic.
Yeah. That's a great reason. They also figured out that by the two of them wearing the cornicellos, it further blocked Wrath and the crone from finding them. And then Vittoria admits that she was the one that was killing all the witches because she wanted vengeance for what was done to both of them. And she's like, I'm not going to rest until all the families pay.
Wild.
So, Emilia just then, I guess, changes, like, tactics. Like, she doesn't want to talk about herself anymore, I guess. But she asks, did you kill Greed's third? But Victoria...
She's obsessed.
She is obsessed.
Is the other thing.
Yeah. But Victoria ignores the question and just tells her that there's a lot that she still needs to understand. And essentially she says she needs to remove her spell lock.
Yeah.
And I guess that's sort of it. This is a remove your spell lock or else sort of a situation.
Yeah.
So Domenico makes a portal for Emilia to, like, go back to her body. So she's being released. And Vittoria threatens her and says if she needs to come and find her again, Emilia will regret it. Because she expects assistance. However, Emilia counters not to threaten her and not to take her against her will again, and that if she wants to find Vittoria, she will.
Fair.
Very fair. So, she wakes up, and Wrath looks murderous. She reassures him that she's okay, tells him what happened, and that Vittoria wants to reestablish their house. So that's sort of Vittoria's goal. She wants to reestablish House Vengeance. And Wrath just says to her, like, if you want to reestablish your house, do it. But then he also says, if Vittoria takes you again, I will hunt her down and kill her so slowly and violently, no one will ever touch Emilia again.
Fair.
And, like, I'm like, maybe it's because it's not my sister, but I'd be just like, okay.
Yeah.
So they chat a little bit more in bed about Vittoria and how she's making bad choices. She's choosing to be terrible and hurt people. Then they discuss Vesta a little bit. They don't think she's dead, and they think that Pride is hiding something about her. They actually then wonder if Greed sent himself the skull to get back at Vittoria for being involved in Vesta's disappearance. Very convoluted.
Yeah, but, like, fine.
Yeah.
Fine.
I'm just accepting it now.
Yeah, like, obviously it's gonna be something like that.
Yeah. Emilia wonders if Vesta used the portal to return home, since she wasn't from the Seven Circles. And maybe she wasn't a victim at all, but maybe the murderer of the remains found in her room.
Mm-hmm.
So they get out of bed and go out on the balcony, and they see red stars in the air form an anatomical heart. And in my head, I'm thinking, oh, that's so nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then an arrow goes through it. And Wrath has to tell Emilia that this is the immortal heart, which is a symbol of the vampire court. And the stars in the sky mean they're sending an emissary.
I'm not gonna lie, I was like, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah. There's a lot happening.
So much.
So I feel like there must be a time lapse, because next thing we know, they're heading to the throne room.
Yeah.
And Emilia notices that their thrones are distinct, because hers has, like, vines on it and stuff, but they're actually the same size, which surprises her that he's, being so equal-minded.
Yeah. Which it kind of shouldn't, I don't think.
But Wrath just tells her that she is his match in every way, and everything that is his is hers. Which is nice. Yes. So they start decorating the hall with oleander and rosary pea. And apparently rosary peas can kill vampires.
Interesting.
Yes. So Fauna gives Emilia a necklace with rubies and rosary peas. And then Wrath orders Fauna to get near, and they wait for the emissary. So emissary walks in, he introduces himself, his name is Blade. And he's like, I brought a companion with me. And it was a beautiful woman, and all Wrath calls her is Cersei. And Emilia immediately knows who it is. She's not a vampire. She's not a demon. She's La Prima Striga.
What?
Mm-hmm.
I guess the point of this vampire thing is meeting her. Because I was like, why are the vampires coming? I don't understand. But now I get it, I guess.
Yeah. Anyway.
What a spot to leave it off.
What a spot. Yep. Coming face to face with the big bad of, I assume, the big bad of the book series, or of this book, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah. It's all about perspective.
Yeah.
Whether it's bad or not.
Oh, God. But yeah. So I guess we're gonna wrap it up for this week. So if you want to get in touch with us and share your thoughts on anything you heard in any of our episodes, or if you have any book suggestions for us, please reach out by email at coffeeandcoread@gmail.com, or on Instagram or Facebook at coffeeandcoread and coffee.coread on TikTok.
So next week, we're going to be reading chapters 15 to 23 of Kingdom of the Feared. So make sure to follow along. And if you're enjoying our chats, don't forget to follow, rate, and review wherever you get our content. Thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll see you on the next page.